Hello there, and welcome to the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. This is season 15, episode 26. You can see an advertisement for season 16, which is coming very soon. And I didn't think I would say this when I first started this show 5 years ago, but today's guest is Roger Ver, investor in Bitcoin projects. He still invests in a bunch of Bitcoin companies that are popular and successful, but he also made some less popular choices in his Bitcoin journey. And before I give you the word, Roger, I just want to mention this, and I think this can be the theme of our discussion. Today is Russell Brick's 40th birthday, and he has been in jail for about 11 years now. And I know that you are one of the people who supported Ross and someone who sent him money and supported all of the initiatives to get him out as fast as possible. And I think this is useful to reflect because you have been in Bitcoin for about 15 years or something, 14 maybe, and you have been with the Bitcoin project for 7 years and then you switched for Bitcoin Cash 7 years ago. So you have been for equal amounts of time in Bitcoin and in Bitcoin Cash. And I guess you have different perspectives of the same length of time. This is a very interesting point of view, and let's start talking about it.
Yeah, I think actually I didn't realize that Bitcoin Cash has been around about as long as Bitcoin was when from the time I got involved with it to the time I started focusing more on Bitcoin Cash. But from my point of view, I never left Bitcoin. And in fact, if you read the Bitcoin white paper versus the things that people are promoting BTC as today, it's not the same project. So from my point of view, I was promoting peer-to-peer cash from the world from day one. And you mentioned early on that I invested in a bunch of businesses. Some did great, some didn't. That's true of any investor, but by co-founding blockchain.com and ripple.com and owning bitcoin.com, I think I've done just fine with my investments in the crypto space.
Yeah, and I just want to mention that no version of Bitcoin today is faithful to the white paper because there's a lot that the white paper doesn't mention, including the 21 million cap, including the separation of miners and nodes, including some sort of, I mean, Satoshi was pretty naive in some regards. He didn't foresee mining pools, he didn't foresee blockchain analysis. He thought it was enough to generate a new address each time you receive a transaction. And Bitcoin today, I guess, part of the reason why I wanted to do this interview is because I believe that Bitcoin needs you more today. And there are people who haven't heard of you. They joined in 2021. You have been pretty quiet during the past bull and bear market cycles. And they know about Michael Saylor, but they don't know anything about Roger Ver. And I think it's interesting to get your perspectives and see where you're standing today.
Yeah, maybe I can give a little bit of a history there too. So like before Michael Saylor was the face of Bitcoin, basically I was one of the main faces of Bitcoin, or arguably even the main face of Bitcoin. And I was telling people things like taxation is theft, and you should have control over your own money, and you should have, that was the entire point of Bitcoin, was self-sovereignty and being in charge of your own funds. And now we have Michael Saylor telling people, pay your taxes. We're not going to replace the US dollar or the euro. Just be a good boy and obey everything the government tells you to do, which is the exact opposite of the early days of Bitcoin. And I heard about Bitcoin for the first time on a radio show called Free Talk Live in reference to the Silk Road. And you mentioned Ross Ulbricht at the beginning of the show. I donated over $1 million to his mom and to help pay for the lawyers and the appeals and this and that. And like, as you said, he's still in prison to this very day. My impression is Michael Saylor doesn't care one bit. And so from my point of view, like, I don't see why Michael Saylor is very interesting for the freedom aspect of Bitcoin. Bitcoin was never supposed to be a get rich quick scheme. It was supposed to be a get free quick scheme, meaning free people and empower them to have control over their own lives and be able to do whatever they want so long as it's peaceful and not have the violent interjection of the state into their financial affairs. And that's still my goal, my involvement with cryptocurrencies. I'm just not very optimistic about BTC fulfilling that goal. And so I'm much more optimistic about other chains being able to fulfill that goal. But I was never a BTC maximalist. I was never a BCH maximalist. I've never been a single coin maximalist of anything. I've been a freedom maximalist the entire time. And my goal the entire time has been to empower individuals to have more control over their own lives and their own destiny and their own financial affairs. And I'm just not very optimistic about BTC achieving those goals at the moment for people whereas I think other chains can do a much better job of it. So that's why I'm much more interested in chains other than BTC at the moment. But from an investment standpoint, BTC has been one of the most successful chains around. So for making money, it's been just fine. But you also have to consider what you can see what's seen. It's about $70,000 as we're recording this. Maybe it would have been $700,000 if the block size hadn't been constrained and it didn't cause a horrible user experience where companies like Steam stopped accepting Bitcoin, Microsoft stopped accepting Bitcoin, Expedia stopped accepting Bitcoin. You had all these giant businesses that started accepting Bitcoin and then stopped because the transactions became slow, expensive, and unreliable by the intentional design of the Blockstream group. And they're busy trying to sell their side chain, Liquid, where they earn all the fees on every transaction. It's kind of stunning to me that more people don't see the takeover that happened there. It'd be like if I went around with a baseball bat smashing people in the legs and then saying, hey, buy crutches for me. I have crutches for sale. It's too bad I whacked you in the legs with my baseball bat, but I'll sell you these crutches. And if it wasn't for me, you wouldn't be able to walk. So you should really thank me for building these crutches at my crutch factory. And like people would see right through that. But a lot of people haven't seen that that's exactly what happened to Bitcoin with Blockstream and the intentional subversion of its usefulness as peer-to-peer cash by limiting its block size and its ability to scale to be money for the world.
I think this needs a little bit of context of backtracking because you come from this libertarian side where you identified Bitcoin, and there's a video of you doing this in 2011, going on a conference panel telling people buy Bitcoin, use it because it's the kind of money that cannot be confiscated, cannot be taxed, and you can transact for free. Basically, at the time there were no transaction fees. And also, you were actually at one point you were bullish on the Lightning Network, and I'm gonna ask you about that after this. But you joined the side of the debate that was advocating for increasing the block size as a way to scale. And there were a series of conferences in 2015, 2016 called Scaling Bitcoin. Developers got together, they presented their ideas. There was also BIP 101 by Gavin Andreessen that was advocating for, correct me if I'm mistaken, for doubling the block size every 4 years or something like this. And it was based around the idea of Moore's law, that storage would also become cheaper and the internet bandwidth would get faster and more affordable. But it's just that maybe that you're right about Blockstream controlling the narrative, but at the same time, we can see that on one hand there are chains like Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash and Dash and Monero and whatever, Zcash. They have very low transaction fees and they have been optimized to an extent for commerce, for enabling individuals to exchange money from one part of the world to another. We also have Terra and Tron right now, and that one is huge, has tens of billions of dollars in volume every day. But this use case didn't really pump the price, so I'm not sure if your hypothesis about Bitcoin being tenfold more, what's the word for it? For being 10
Market
times
value.
higher in price today
Yeah.
is necessarily correct. And I'm not sure if I like the idea of every transaction existing on the blockchain forever, because blockchain analysis got a lot more advanced these days. That's why one of my sponsors is Wasabi Wallet. They have this CoinJoin wallet that mixes your coins with those of hundreds of other users, and you get coins that are equally tainted and equally clean. You don't know where it comes from at the end of a few CoinJoin rounds. And to counter the FUD, and I'm gonna finish the ad right now, to counter the FUD of CoinJoin coins not getting accepted on exchanges, they introduced this buy anything button, which is a backend to a merchant that's called ShopInBit. And basically it's a concierge service where you tell one of their sales agents via Tor what you want and where you want it to get delivered, and then you pay it with private Bitcoin. And it's a pretty cool user experience. So check out wasabiwallet.io. But I want to ask you, what do you think about the Lightning Network and why did you like it initially in 2015?
So I'd like to address some of the points you just made previously, though, actually. And I really appreciate us not talking over each other. Like, thank you so much for having such a great demeanor on that front. And so in regards to the points you were just making, I think you actually proved a lot of my points. So billions of dollars of commerce is happening on top of Tron. Litecoin is being used in a huge way for e-commerce. So is Bitcoin Cash. So are a whole bunch of other coins. And that's all traffic and usage that would have been on top of Bitcoin if the user experience had continued to be good. If the user experience had continued to be good on Bitcoin, nobody would use Litecoin for anything. Bitcoin Cash never would have even come into existence. People wouldn't be nearly as interested in USDT on Tron or any of the other chains out there. So all of that commerce that you just mentioned would have been taking place on top of Bitcoin. All that additional market cap would have been part of Bitcoin. All of that would have been taking place on top of Bitcoin. And so to answer your most recent question there about the Lightning Network, I'm sure I probably said some nice things about the Lightning Network in the same sense that like I would like there to be flying saucers to zip us around the universe next week or in the next 18 months. But I'm not optimistic that that's going to happen. It would be wonderful if it did, and I'll be a fan of it, and I'll gladly, zip myself around the universe in a flying saucer. But the same was kind of true of Lightning Network. Like they promised 18 months over and over and over. And if they had delivered, great, that would be wonderful. We'd all be able to make use of it. But here we are, like I think 9 years later after they started promising 18 months away, and it's still not very good at all. And you're still using like these centralized hubs most of the time. And the user experience still is nowhere near as good as just using Bitcoin directly on chain was back as early as like, I don't know, 2012 or 2013. It was starting to get pretty decent.
Yeah. Well, so just for the record, I don't like talking while you're talking. I'll listen to you, I'll address what you're saying, but I'll just let you finish your sentence because I noticed in your interviews, and I've listened to almost all of them. I've listened to your debate with John Carvalho, I've listened to your debate with Richard Hart. They all had agendas, And we established when we started this that we would talk in a civil way and we would address, even if we disagree, we would address the issues and we will try to find the truth, not try to push any sort of agenda.
Right. And there was zero sarcasm on my side when I said I'm genuinely enjoying and appreciating your demeanor and how we're not talking over each other. So thank you for that.
Yeah. And about the Lightning Network, I was super excited about it. I was an early adopter on Litecoin actually, because Litecoin was being tested before Bitcoin mainnet, and I burned an SSD trying to sync a node. But that's a hardware issue. It has nothing to do with Lightning or Litecoin. But I was super excited about it. I tried to run a routing node because that was the thing at the time, to operate your own sovereign node from home and try to get routing fees. It was regarded as this business opportunity. It didn't work out because of how Lightning works, and I lost a lot of money opening and closing channels. And I was even more disappointed, so it doesn't matter that I lost some Bitcoin. It was paid to the miners, let's say that it went to the security of the network. I was just unhappy that a year later the narrative changed and it was all about liquidity providers and big servers that provide service, and you should get an LSP. What's an LSP? Lightning Service Provider. How many LSPs are out there? Well, a handful of them. And I gotta give them credit. They offer a pretty good service, but it's just not what I conceived when I thought about the Lightning Network. It was supposed to be almost not as decentralized as Bitcoin, but decentralized nonetheless. And it's getting more centralized, and people say, yeah, but now it's more efficient. And it's fine to use wallets of Satoshi for small amounts, and it's fine to use an Uncle Jim. And this is my main disappointment with the Lightning Network, because it moved goalposts. And right now, there's that issue that was discovered by someone. I think his name is Antoine Riard. I don't want to mispronounce his name. But he made a pretty fatalistic prediction back in October or November. And ever since, Lightning has been losing some of its adoption. And I guess the volumes are still high because people send each other small amounts. And there are some video games that pay you for playing them with small Lightning amounts. So there's still some volume, but you don't see an increase in TVL, which means total value locked. You don't see more Bitcoin coming into Lightning. You actually see big players getting bigger because they keep on betting on this, and you see small players like myself giving up and looking into drive chains. I'm sure you know Paul Stortz. When he was on the show, he said some nice things about you. He said that when he was in academia and he was trying to do this prediction market thing, and Blockstream initially made him an offer, but they said, yeah, we need to check with our compliance office to see if this is legal. And then you came along and you said, oh, the more illegal, the better. And I
I don't
guess
know if I said it quite like that. It's just to be clear, and sorry to interrupt, but I don't think I said the more illegal, the better. So um, just wanted to clarify there, please. So
yeah, of course. I mean, it's a metaphor, okay? You're happy just to support free markets, let's put it this way. And you were supportive of Paul, and right now he's trying to unify the entire Bitcoin fork ecosystem under this idea of drive chains where everyone gets what they want. And I'm pretty optimistic on it. I understand the trade offs, but I don't see any better proposal out there which grants control to keys, because that's the whole point. If you're not sovereign and you buy ETFs or you trade on someone else's balance sheet, what's the point?
yeah, I think I'd like to address some of the mentions you had in regards to Lightning Network, though, too. I think Wallet of Satoshi needs to change their name because it's not a wallet; it's a custodial account. So they should change it to their, I don't know, call it like a online account that Satoshi wouldn't have cared about because you don't have your own keys yourself or something else like that. And I think it's really disappointing. And like, I'm really, really glad like for Wasabi Wallet to be out there trying to like provide additional privacy on top of BTC. But I don't know how often you've used it yourself, but I would guess that the fees can be very, very high to get privacy on top of something like BTC using Wasabi Wallet, whereas you could probably get much better privacy for a fraction of the cost on something like Monero or using CashFusion on top of Bitcoin Cash. And so, like, more power to Wasabi for trying to bring privacy to BTC, but at this point, I think there's much better privacy options out there, or at least much more cost-effective privacy options out there. And then, in regards to not having every transaction be on chain all the time, like that's great. Like if you can do that, but a lot of the use cases you're talking about with Lightning Network, like these online games, you can do the same with just a payment channel. You don't actually have to have the whole Lightning Network. You can just open a payment channel with whatever game or whatever service you're wanting to use. So, and I'm 100% on board and in agreement with you. Like the goalposts for Lightning Network shifted over and over and over again, both in terms of time and of what the user experience is going to be for the people using it. In regards to Paul Stork and drive chains, like seems like another pretty decent idea that probably isn't going to get adoption on top of Bitcoin would be my guess. And maybe I'll be proven wrong. And, that's great if I am. Like the more great things the world gets to use, the happier I am. But I'm not super optimistic about much of anything taking place on top of BTC any longer. I kind of feel like it's ossified and the community is very set in its ways. And I don't think they'll ever do too much innovative stuff ever again is kind of my guess as to the future of Bitcoin. But you never know. So and I'd love to ask Michael Saylor. Like I know he knew about Bitcoin for years and years and years when it was this libertarian free market thing, and he hated it, or at least he didn't pay any attention and didn't care about it. And then much more recently, now he's become the face of Bitcoin, but it doesn't have any of the characteristics that made it popular to begin with. And so I'd love to hear from him what made him change his mind from early on when he knew about Bitcoin until more recently, where suddenly now he loves Bitcoin. Why did he change his mind, and what was the argument or the factor, the thing that made him change his mind? So if you ever have the chance to ask him, please consider asking him that question. What made him change his mind about Bitcoin? Because he knew about it earlier and didn't like it, and now suddenly more recently he does like it. Why?
I guess he answered that question, but he likes to talk in these fortune cookies. He likes to make
Cyber
these
Hornets.
bullish narratives and say, yeah, it was the right time and blah, blah, blah. And he's gonna say he was able to leverage stocks from his company to sell them, to do all of these smart schemes. I gotta give him credit for being able to constantly raise more funds to buy Bitcoin. But does he even own any Bitcoin because it's custodied by someone else? And you never know what's going to happen with that. I mean, you went through the whole Mt. Gox situation. You were pretty involved in it, so you know what can happen
Yeah.
when
I
you
lost
get situations.
28,000 Bitcoins in an exchange that went bankrupt even before Mt. Gox. And so at the time, Bitcoins were like $4 each. So I lost, a little over $100,000. But, today, 28,000 Bitcoins, that's a heck of a lot of money. And yeah, if they're not your keys, they're not your coins, whether it's, BTC or BCH or Lightning Network or anything else. Like the best advice I think I can give to just about anybody in crypto is to hold your money yourself.
Do you ever think about the fact that you probably at one point had more Bitcoin than Michael Saylor, and you could be bigger than him today?
That thought has crossed my mind, but I think I'm still philosophically much more on the right track than he is today. I think he's just out there trying to pump BTC to, make as much money as he can, but doesn't care about empowering individuals to have more control over their lives one bit. He's literally preaching the opposite out there. So to me, like, I would rather, I'd rather not sell my soul to become, some, giant, the biggest BTC holder in the world. I'd rather continue promoting something that's actually empowering individuals to have more control over their own lives. And that's why I was an early adopter of things like Bitcoin Cash and Monero and Zcash and Dash and on and on and on, because those, I think, actually empower individuals to have more control over their own lives. Whereas I'm not that optimistic about BTC doing that into the future. I'm actually really concerned that all the people still building on top of BTC are busy building the prison walls, the financial prison walls around them that are going to, enslave them or entrap them. And that's very concerning for me. And I don't want to see that happen. And so I did my best to sound the alarm about that.
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I promote Wasabi. I'm mirrored, so I gotta use the other hand. Because I get the impression that they have good intentions and they're trying to work around the limitations of Bitcoin. But I'm also excited when I see people promoting improvements on Bitcoin. And I see Jeremy Rubin promoting CTV. I had on the show Andrew Polstra from Blockstream, and he was speaking very highly of Opcat, which is an opcode that indirectly enables you to do a lot of interesting stuff, including covenants. And I don't think Bitcoin is ossified at this point. It's just that I guess the culture has changed and has become more adversarial. There's a lot of Wall Street money pouring in, and these people don't want any change. One way to destroy Bitcoin, basically, and I've been speaking to Paul Storts about this, I think. I think it was Paul. I told him, you can just pay developers to do nothing, to go to conferences, to talk about how great this project is, to talk about your ideas about how it can be better, but never actually code anything. And this is an attack vector because I think the governments and everyone involved, politicians, they caught up. They know how Bitcoin works. There are tools that help them track transactions. It's not the same it was 10 years ago, maybe. And we have to adapt to this situation and we have to come up with new cryptographic tricks, I guess. And coin joins are still interesting. And if you know how to use them, you can obfuscate a great amount of what you're doing on chain. And this was part of the cypherpunk ethos. Going back to David Chaum, who was talking about how to hide in a crowd in this Orwellian surveillance state, how to be indistinguishable from the rest while being authentic and unique. And I like this. And I'm more optimistic about Bitcoin than you are. I don't know why you're so pessimistic about ossification, because I don't think it's happening. And after you give me your reply to this, I'm gonna read you a message. I just got a message from Paul Storts, and he wants me to read you something.
Great. I'll be glad to hear from Paul after this. And so in regards to the ossification, like, I hope I'm wrong, and maybe I'm just not aware of some of the developments that have been happening on top of BTC because I haven't been focused on that chain at all for the last couple of years. But uh, I hope I get proven wrong. Like anytime I'm pessimistic about anything, I hope I'm proven wrong. But I think that there's a whole lot better coins for private commerce out there in the world than BTC at this point. And I would love to ask you, like, I don't know offhand, like, what are the average fees to do a privacy, coin join transaction using Wasabi Wallet on BTC? I would guess it ranges from, $5 to, $50 or something, depending on what's going on with the network state. Whereas you can do that on Monero for, I don't know, a couple of pennies, and then Bitcoin Cash less than a penny using CashFusion. And I had a firsthand experience just maybe 3 months ago. Where somebody said, "Oh, there's Chainalysis can see everything that you do on Bitcoin Cash." And I said, "Are you aware of CashFusion?" And he said, "No, no, no, no." I said, "Well, let's test it out." And I asked for his address, and I said I withdrew from one exchange, sent it through a single CashFusion, and then sent the money to his address. And then he asked his buddies over at Chainalysis, "Hey, give me a breakdown of this transaction." And then he sent me the report. They got absolutely everything wrong. So that made me really optimistic about the future of privacy on Bitcoin Cash. And hopefully they get absolutely everything wrong on Wasabi CashFusion as well, or CoinJoin. But yeah, But feel free to take it away. You can tell me what Paul had to say, or if you want to add anything to that, please feel free.
Yeah, I'm actually curious how CashFusion works. What is it?
It's basically coin join, but instead of using the same amounts, every input and output is random. So maybe I have 5 inputs, you have 8 inputs, some other guy over there has 3 inputs. And for my 5 inputs to the transaction, maybe I'll get 8 outputs. And they're all for different amounts. And so the way the math works out is there's more potential combinations of money in and money out than there are atoms in the universe. And so good luck tracking that down. So a transaction on the blockchain will look like some transaction that maybe has, 75 inputs and 85 outputs or something like that. You don't know which inputs correspond with which outputs, and they're all for different amounts. And actually, the Wasabi guys had lots of really good things to say about it, and they had been collaborating a bit at some point and talking with the Bitcoin Cash guys about it, because I think both the Wasabi guys and the Bitcoin Cash people appreciate privacy, and any tools that we can share to make both chains more private, I think everybody will be on board with that.
I wasn't aware of that, but the way you describe CashFusion sounds like Wasabi 2.0, which is Wabi Sabi. So they might share some code base. I don't know. I gotta look into it. I wasn't
I
aware.
know both sides were collaborating with each other, so it's very possible that the Wasabi guys took advantage of the CashFusion technology from Bitcoin Cash.
So the message from Paul is the following, and I was instructed to read it in a very serious tone, so I'm gonna try. Lightning Network is a perfect system with no problems. Your transactions will be so fast, they will arrive yesterday, and so private that no one really knows if the transaction actually went through or not. Even you won't know. VCs have poured millions of dollars into Lightning. That's how you know it's legit. Twitter also likes Lightning. Hundreds of people put a lightning bolt in their name, and when have they ever been wrong? Released in 2015, back when Obama was still president, now is the perfect time for you to jump on the LN bandwagon. Just do as you're told and don't ask too many questions or whether or not this idea is in your best financial interest. After all, that's what makes us Bitcoiners. With the Lightning Network, Bitcoin doesn't just walk on water, it dances on it. I'm Layer 2 Labs and I support this message. Or do I?
Excellent job reading that with a straight face. Even listening, I had a hard time not laughing, because most of those claims were actually like true and factual about the history of Lightning. That was how it was presented to the world. So I do remember everybody had their lightning bolts in their Twitter profiles, and they were promising all that sort of nonsense. So nicely done, Paul.
No, I had a lightning emoji in my name also, and I was super excited about this. And I still use it sometimes, but it's not what I wanted. It's not what I expected.
I feel like Lightning Network was probably one of the most hyped pieces of vaporware ever in the history of like the entire internet. Like I can't think of a project that had more hype behind it and more excitement and more VC that absolutely flopped into nothing. If someone has some ideas of something that was turned out to be even bigger vaporware than Lightning, please let me know. But I can't think of any at the moment.
Oh, there is David Marcus, right? The guy from Libra who was going to build the currency for Facebook, and now he's super bullish on Lightning. And the narrative has shifted from be your own node and transact with anyone around the world in this more private way that's scalable. It shifted to B2B, which means business to business. So I guess I
Might as well just have a
contributed
payment
to.
channel for. I'm sorry.
I feel a bit disappointed that I put my work and my time into studying this and trying to promote it to everyone, and then I realized, okay, it's not what I thought. I guess you feel the same with BTC sometimes. It
Yeah,
didn't turn out the way that I wanted.
yeah. I definitely feel that way. Oftentimes, I feel like it kind of turned into almost the reverse, right? I feel like everyone's being surveilled and having, using a custodian, they have even less control over their money than maybe they did before.
But you made a statement before this, and it goes back like 15 minutes ago, that all the activity on Tron and all the activity on Litecoin and all the activity on Bitcoin Cash and Dash and all of these coins that are used for payments could have been on Bitcoin and the price would be tenfold. If you add them up, you're gonna see that maybe you get a 60% increase to the price, but not more than this. And then you can argue that Bitcoin as a brand could have been much bigger than Dash or Litecoin or whatever, and there would be no confusion about what Bitcoin is. But it seems like this medium of exchange doesn't have as much demand, as the store of value function, which I guess is more popular in times of high inflation.
Yeah, I think whoever was saying that they're not looking at the big picture there, like the medium of exchange, whatever people can use as a medium of exchange is what they also want to use as their store value as well. And so like the whole thing, like a good example of it is Expedia. They stopped accepting Bitcoin in 2017. Here we are 7 years later. They haven't started accepting Bitcoin again. They haven't started accepting crypto again. And so how many businesses are there out there in the world that would have been using crypto and would have been using it the whole way through that still aren't today? So like, I'm not sure what the total market cap of all the cryptos in the world is today, but maybe that the total market cap, not just of Bitcoin, but of all cryptos, maybe it could be, maybe an order of magnitude higher than it is already. So it's really hard to say, but it certainly would have been higher than it is today if the user experience had continued to be good on Bitcoin, especially considering everybody today on Bitcoin for the most part is using a custodian. Well, like that was the argument against bigger blocks, is that, oh, it'll be too expensive to run your a full node and you won't be able to have self sovereignty over your coins. Well, right now today nobody has self sovereignty over their coins because they're all busy using an account. So might as well have let them continue having a good user experience with fast, cheap, reliable transactions rather than forcing everybody to use an account. So I think it's a bit short-sighted to say that, oh, all the other coins aren't bigger than Bitcoin today. Well, Bitcoin would have been bigger and a lot bigger, and I don't even know how many of the other coins would have even come into existence if the user experience on Bitcoin had continued to be excellent.
Well, I'm not sure if I agree entirely with what you said because the market has spoken. It's been about 7 years since there was this split in the Bitcoin community. And there was no point when it seemed like Bitcoin Cash had more demand on the market. And
I don't
you can
know.
say
Right
that the
after this,
market is rigged or something, or that maybe the times don't reflect necessarily your economic philosophy, but we have the free market, which spoke louder than any person's opinion, you know?
so I'd like to disagree again on several points there. So one, the free market is never done speaking. Two, it's not a free market, right? It's not a free market at all, not even remotely close. You have all these bureaucrats and politicians all over the world setting rules for this and rules for that. And BTC is allowed to have an ETF today, maybe Ethereum will next week. Ripple's in trouble with the SEC. Bitcoin Cash is in limbo. Monera's not allowed to be listed on exchanges in half the countries around the world because it's too private. Like we're not even remotely close to a free market. And then the average Joe on the street has no time to dig into this or understand it at all. Like I was trying to help a not a close friend, but like somebody I know who bought some crypto or Bitcoin early on because they knew me and I told them to. But now they have a couple $100,000 in crypto, all with a custodian. They have no clue about anything. They can't figure out how to send a transaction themselves. They know nothing, but they want to buy more BTC. And I asked them, I said, why do you want to buy more BTC? And she goes, well, I see the price went up a lot, so I want to buy more. And I think that's like the main reason the price of BTC is so high is it has the cool name of Bitcoin and people see the price being high, so they think it must be good. But that's just lemmings following other lemmings is what that is. Like I think the real utility is in other chains at this point, and the long-term store value will be in something that actually works for payments. Like I don't think BTC is going to be a very good store value when one of these big custodians that's holding everybody's BTC has a government come in and say, okay, give us half of everybody's Bitcoin because this country has a deficit problem, or give us everybody's BTC because there's a war we want to fight, or who knows what. But the moment that sort of thing happens, BTC is not going to be viewed as a very good store of value any longer. Whereas coins where people can easily and most of the time do hold their private keys themselves, I think they'll look a lot more attractive at that point. Whether it's Bitcoin Cash or something else, I don't know. But I think centralizing everything into these custodians is a bad idea for the long-term store value front as well. Or another example, in El Salvador, everyone's using Strike. It's not a wallet; it's an account. I hope that they have everybody's Bitcoins, but for
It's
all we know,
Chivo, it's not Strike. They didn't
I'm
agree
sorry,
with
Tito.
Strike.
Sorry, thank you. But for all we know, they're already engaging in fractional Bitcoining as well, right? Maybe they don't have everybody's Bitcoin and they're just trading around, some fraction of the actual Bitcoins they're supposed to have. And if everybody someday were to try and actually take delivery of their Bitcoins or do something with it, maybe it turns out that they already sold them a long time ago and they don't have them, just like we've seen happen over and over again with different exchanges, like Mt. Gox just being the most famous one. But there's been plenty of other times that that's happened as well.
I agree that it's a huge problem with this rehypothecation or paper Bitcoin. You don't know if it's there. It's just a number on your screen. It's not verified by your node. You basically have to trust some system, and that's anti-Bitcoin. It wasn't made for this. Some people go back to Hal Finney, who came up with this bullish narrative back in 2009 and said that if all the household money is gonna be put into Bitcoin, we're gonna get Bitcoin banks and we're gonna have this situation. But then again, if you have this convergence of cypherpunks and libertarians, I guess these people will never agree with a user experience which does not grant you full control of over your own money. Maybe that you have the number go up function and you're gonna get richer and you're gonna do a speculative investment and it's gonna be successful. But let me tell you this, because there are a lot of Bitcoin bulls out there on Twitter. Let me tell you what Pierre Rochard would say to your statement about the government doing the 6102 to Bitcoin and confiscating everything that's being stored. They would say, oh, this is the ultimate acknowledgement that Bitcoin is a great store of value, right? Because maybe it doesn't work for the average person who stored value in Bitcoin and used the custodian, but it worked for the government, and the government agreed that it has value, and therefore it took it away. So it did the same that it did to gold, which means that Bitcoin equals gold, but it's better and faster because it's on the internet. I don't know. You can spin this up and you can make up bullish narratives, and this is part of the reason why I end up agreeing with you a lot, because these people are insane.
All right. Very sorry about that. That's an interesting point that he makes there. But in the long term, maybe it wasn't a good store of value if they took it, right? Your value got stolen. It was a good steal of value, not store of value. But and governments take everything, right? They'll take your house, they'll take your money right out of your bank account. They'll take anything of value whenever they can or whenever they decide they want to. So, yeah, and if it was worth nothing, they wouldn't take it. But I think that they'll gladly take anything they can get their hands on. Is kind of the way I look at it.
Let me read an ad and then let me ask you about your book, which is called Hijacking Bitcoin, and it's for sale, for pre-sale right now. You can pre-order on Amazon. So this ad is for hodling.ch, which is a business from Switzerland. And they say that at Hodling SA, we're here to simplify the complexities of Bitcoin security, providing peace of mind through a secure, private, and self-managed environment. In the Swiss tradition of precision and security, our services assist you in setting up, maintaining, and operating a self-custodial Bitcoin infrastructure, from the selection of multi-signature configurations and hardware wallets, to ensuring that your setup is robust and tailored to your needs. Basically, it's a service if you're a large holder or an exchange or some sort of business and you want to have an advanced setup with multi-sig but don't have the expertise, they can help you. So check out hodling.ch. And now, Roger, what about your book? Why did you decide to release it now and not 2 years ago or freshly after the block size wars?
Yeah, I guess a couple of reasons that it came out now. The biggest one was it caught me by surprise as well. It was interesting just how much pushback there were from a number of publishers to actually get it published, and it completely caught myself off guard as when Amazon put it on there for pre-sale like about a week ago. It actually probably would have been out about a year earlier though too, but I actually had some issues in my personal life that I was busy dealing with, so that delayed things by about a year. But anyhow, I'm glad it's out now. Hijackingbitcoin.com is the website for the book. You can buy it with cryptocurrency, of course, or with regular old fiat there on Amazon. But I think it's a story that really needs to be told. For the most part, the stories are told by the victors. The big block side till now has lost in terms of the Bitcoin scaling war, but I think it's really important for both sides to be heard. And one side engaged in a whole bunch of censorship and dirty, immoral tactics as well that are all outlined in the book. And the other side, for the most part, they weren't saints. One side it wasn't perfect, and the other was the devil. But one side definitely engaged in way more censorship and dirty tactics than the other. And I think it's important for that story to get out there as well. And and a lot of people, like you said, are new to Bitcoin. They'll have no idea who I am or what role that I played in Bitcoin. But the book doesn't cover that, but it will give you a very, very factual, detailed account of everything that happened within this civil war that went on within Bitcoin. And I think anybody, whether you're old and been around Bitcoin for almost 15 years, or if you just came, 15 months ago, you'll learn a lot from this book because a lot took place and there's a lot of information that I think is important to get out there. And finally, now it's all collected in one place, and it'll be an interesting read for anybody, whether you're a Bitcoin maximalist or a freedom maximalist. You'll find it interesting.
I listened to your interview on the BCH podcast, and you mentioned the story. He asked you for a funny story, and you mentioned something about Amir Taki and how he ran away after using that Segway or whatever it's called, the two-wheel vehicle. And I was going to ask you, you mentioned some very interesting and big names in your book, and they have been indexed. I think it was the account of BitMEX Research that first of all called your book the counterpoint of the block size wars, which is another book that was published. So it's basically the other side of the history, which tells stories. And I'm pretty sure that you have some inside stories from behind the curtains that took place during the block size wars and how everything happened. And is there anything that you can share to hype up the book and make people buy it?
Yeah, let's see, hype up the book and make people buy it. I'm sure once the book actually gets delivered by Amazon, which will be April 5th, but you can pre-order it now, I'm sure that Twitter and everywhere else will just erupt in arguments, and I think it'll reopen this whole debate, because I think a lot of people don't know, like the small block side literally were doing things like DDoSing nodes that were running big block software. They removed Coinbase from bitcoin.org, claiming that they weren't actually promoting Bitcoin because they were in favor of bigger blocks. Like there was just all sorts of crazy stuff. They attacked every single email address at bitcoin.com with just thousands and thousands of spam emails that are still going on to this day. Like these, anybody that was working there that had an email address back then, we're still getting flooded with these spam emails. And there was just a whole bunch of really, really wild stuff. But for those that don't know, the Amir Taki story, I don't think it's in the Hijacking Bitcoin book, but it was kind of a funny one. I guess there's two types of anarchists in the world. Ones that just live their life in chaos, and then like ones like myself that I want order and structure, but I don't want hierarchical like political authority to exist. And Amir was I think he's in the other camp there. He's just a bit of a wild man, and I appreciate his interesting and early things that he did in Bitcoin there as well. But he literally was riding a Segway, couldn't stay with the group, and then some girl with a sign that said free hugs. He hopped off his Segway without turning it off and powering it off, and the Segway went off with nobody riding on it down the street, almost got hit by a trolley car, went through 4 lanes of traffic and crashed into a tree across the street, and then tipped over and started gyrating and shaking. And like any responsible person, they would have gone over to the Segway and said, oh my gosh, let me turn it off or restore it. Amir saw what happened, and he literally just ran away down the street and left the Segway there. And the poor lady that was in charge of the Segway tour had to, power down hers and then get that one back under control. And so I think that's an example for anybody of what not to do. Like, it's fine to do your own thing, but not in an irresponsible way, right? So like sometimes it's a little bit better to follow the group. Sometimes it's better to do your own thing. But if you're going to do your own thing, do it in a responsible way that doesn't cause problems for others.
Do you have any Gavin or Vladimir Vanderland stories that you can share before the book gets published? Or Greg
I think one
Maxwell,
of
I
the
guess
most,
that's more spicy.
or who was the other person that was more
Greg
spicy?
Maxwell.
Oh, I guess I don't think it's mentioned in the book, but one of the spicier Greg Maxwell stories that I have, or I think maybe the funniest, right? So like when the block size wars were happening, I went on blockstream.com, the website, and I took the photos that all the Blockstream people were using for the people that were working there, because most of the people on the other side of the block size war were employed at Blockstream at that time. And so I literally took the pictures from their own website and their own bio and used them. And then I attributed the quotes to them, because a lot of people early on, they didn't understand that these people openly said that they wanted Bitcoin transactions to be slow, expensive, and unreliable. And even today in 2024, a lot of people don't realize that they openly say they want the Bitcoin transactions to be slow, expensive, and unreliable. And so I took their photos and I put slides attributing them, quotes to them, trying to get the word out and say, hey, these people want Bitcoin to be slow, expensive, and unreliable. And so there's a picture of Greg Maxwell, and he has kind of like long frizzy hair and a long frizzy beard. And it's like not the type of facial hair that most people have in most situations in life. And a lot of the small blockers attacked me and accused me of like finding the most unflattering photo of him that I possibly could and putting that in my slides to try and bias people against him. Whereas the truth of the matter is, I literally took his own photo that he chose for his own bio on his own website, where I think he was the CTO at Blockstream there. So to me, it just seemed really funny that people were attacking me for the photo I chose of him, trying to claim that that was to bias people against him, but it was literally his own profile photo on his own website that he had chosen himself. So to me, I found that a bit funny, but that's not one of the technological funny things. The technological funny things were just that, like, people still, even today, I don't think they realize that they openly say they want the Bitcoin transactions to be slow, expensive, and unreliable.
Yeah, I was just thinking before we started this interview that so many people regard you as a hero still, and they want you back to Bitcoin, and they want you to get involved with your advocacy because you're very good at convincing people to do stuff. And on the other hand, after you joined the Bitcoin Cash camp, you got in that situation with Craig Wright, where I don't know why you acknowledged him, but maybe he genuinely convinced you at one point, and then you had to go to court with him. And you also had situations with Jihan, and I heard on the Bitcoin Cash podcast that you said you went to court with him for some reason. And it seems like you had all of these unpleasant situations that I guess changed your perception of what the space is and what it's about. And it was pretty disappointing, I guess. But I just want you to know that you're still a hero to some people in Bitcoin.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words there. Maybe one person at a time. At one point, Craig Wright had convinced me that he was Satoshi, and it took maybe a couple of years before. I think I forget the exact year I first met him, but I'd have to check my notes. But maybe I first met him. Actually, he first started emailing me about Bitcoin in 2011. So very, very early. And so like when he kind of came onto the scene, I checked my email records, and like sure enough, he had been contacting me in 2011. But he convinced me that he was Satoshi much, much later. I don't know, maybe 2016 or something like that. And for a time I was convinced, but then a year or two later, maybe 2017 or 18 or something like that, I became more and more skeptical as time went by. And then there was one point where it became absolutely clear to me, like, I haven't done any computer coding since I was in high school, right? But I still know what a checksum is. And I knew that Bitcoin addresses have a checksum at the end. Craig Wright, right there in front of my own eyes, did not know that Bitcoin addresses have a checksum. And so like when I realized that he did not know that Bitcoin addresses have a checksum, there was zero doubt in my mind at that point that he could be Satoshi, because Satoshi absolutely would have known that Bitcoin addresses have a checksum. And so that was kind of the end. And it's, it's really, really hard. I think what Mark Twain says, it's easier to fool a man than to convince a man that he's been fooled. Well, I'll tell you, it's also very, very difficult to admit publicly that you had been fooled. And so I went and made a video, I forget the exact year of it, but maybe 2017 or 18, letting people know, hey, Craig fooled me, and I'm sorry I was fooled, and that's all we can do. And then there's been nonstop lawsuits with him ever since. But I think he's finally about to run away with his tail between his legs, because it seems like Calvin's done funding his lawsuits. And if you think about it from Calvin's point of view, right, he's been funding his CoinGeek website. He's literally been paying with his own money year after year after year, millions and millions of dollars to advertise to the world that he's been fooled by a con man. So I really feel bad for Calvin. And it's funny when you think about it that way, but you should, and Calvin's caused a lot of trouble too. But so you should feel a little bit bad for him though at the same time, because he got fooled by a con man in the form of Craig Wright as well. And Calvin, it's time to, it's hard to do, but, step up to the plate and admit that you were fooled by a con man, and, give a mea culpa there, just like I had to do previously as well. And a number of people. Craig has fooled a lot of really smart people, but he can be the best con men are the most convincing ones, right? Craig can be very convincing, but I think he's just a very convincing con man.
Yeah, so just so you know, there's Ben Ark. He is working on some Bitcoin projects. One of them is called LN Bits, and he paid 500,000 Satoshis, that's 0.005 BTC, to ask you this one question. And the question is, can you come back to Bitcoin? We miss you.
Thank you for the invitation. As soon as I see BTC as a project that could have a chance at providing more economic freedom for the world, I would be right back there in a moment. But at the moment, I see projects like Monero and Zeno and Bitcoin Cash and Litecoin and things like that having a much, much bigger potential impact on freedom for the world. And maybe I can give a slight shout out for Zeno.org. I really like that project. It's basically like a Monero, but for tokens. So it's a token platform where anybody can issue their own token, and each individual token has the same sort of privacy and on-chain obfuscation as Monero itself. So I'm really a big fan of privacy tokens. We saw a lot of e-commerce on the darknet move from BTC to Monero because of the privacy. Then Ethereum came along and all these EVM chains with tokens, but there's no privacy tokens. Where are the privacy tokens? I think we're going to see a big wave of privacy tokens will be the next thing in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. And Zano.org is one of the very, very few platforms that I've seen out there that seems to have privacy tokens available. So I see that as a really cool tool to bring more economic freedom to the world. So if you're looking for tools to bring more economic freedom to the world, take a look at BTC, take a look at BCH, Litecoin, Monero, this and that. But I think Zano is an up and coming one for the privacy tokens, because there's not really a privacy token platform out there that I'm aware of other than that one.
So just for the record, you did see that you consider coming back to BTC at a point in the future when you see that there's more development happening and it's not ossified?
I would come back today if I thought it had a good chance of bringing more economic freedom to the world. But right now, I'm afraid that BTC has morphed into all these people that are building the financial prison walls around them that are going to financially enslave them with the traditional financial system. And that's not something I want to be a part of or participate in or advocate for. So, but thank
There's
you.
also
Please thank him. Like, or I'm sure he's listening. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. And I have lots of really warm, wonderful feelings towards lots of early people in Bitcoin as well. And just because we have a difference of opinion on the best, because all the early Bitcoiners, or almost all of them, wanted more economic freedom for the world. And I think there's still people within the BTC ecosystem that want that. I just think most of them left for other projects at this point. But for the ones that are still working on BTC, and I think Paul Stork is one of them as well, actually, for that matter. Like, I have nothing but warm, fuzzy feelings towards those people still.
Yeah, I enjoy looking up to fighters, people who see this adversarial environment and they say, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna push this. I know it has good intentions behind it. I'm gonna follow the entire procedure, because following the entire BIP procedure is not easy at all. First of all, you have to go through all of this bureaucratic verification to make sure that your proposal is written the correct way for the developers to read. Then you have to release some testnet to allow developers to test it, and then you go to public advocacy to see if the users want it. It's a very long and tedious and annoying procedure, but it seems like Paul is willing to follow it, and I appreciate him for it. And also Jeremy Rubin and a bunch of others. There's another question that you got, because I allowed the BTC and the BCH camps to pay with BTC and BCH to ask you a question. And it's interesting to see that I'm not gonna make any assumptions here. I will just present you the numbers. There were more than 10 bids on the BTC side, and there were only 3 on the BCH side. And on the BCH side, there were a bunch of people from RBTC who wanted to ask you a question about you supporting some sort of proposal. But someone else outbid them with 0.21 BCH and wants me to ask, his name is AlphaTune. He said, Roger, given your advocacy for scaling Bitcoin through larger block sizes and inherent sustainability of the UTXO model for sharding, how do you evaluate Alephium's blockflow algo as a sharding solution? And he also gave a link to an intro.
Alephium or Ethereum?
Alephium.
I can't comment because I'm not familiar with Alephium. So, but the more projects that people try out there to scale things and make useful things for the world, I'm supportive of all of that, whether it's drive chains or Alephium. Like, go ahead and give it a try.
Okay. It was interesting because this one is the winner, and he clearly wanted to promote Alephium.
You don't think it was a typo for Ethereum, or?
No, it's
Oh, with an A.
Alephium. Like, I
Okay,
don't know.
well, we can all go out there and Google Alephium and take a look. And congratulations to him for promoting his project, or
It
whatever that
was
is.
a quarter of a BCH, so not too expensive.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so much that you did in Bitcoin, and it's kind of a shame that you're regarded. I mean, I see some efforts to erase you. When I announced that I was going to do this interview, they asked me, why do you want to give that scammer a platform? Because he's only going to lie. And I was like, how do you know what questions I'm going to ask to him and what the conversation is going to be about?
Yeah, and to the best of my knowledge, I haven't told any lies on this interview or any interviews for that matter. But I feel like that's just one of the lies they've been told about me, and it was one of the dirty tactics that they tried to use during the civil war within Bitcoin. They tried to say that I was a known scammer or a convicted felon. And like, yeah, I'm a convicted felon. I sold firecrackers on eBay without a license and then ran for political office. Like, not a crime of moral turpitude in any way, shape, or form, but they tried to weaponize that as a tool to attack my credibility in regards to my opinion on Bitcoin. And the recent additional release emails that were released from Satoshi in the lawsuit maybe a month ago really make it even more clear that like Satoshi definitely like had very similar opinions to my own in terms of the way to scale Bitcoin for money for the world. So
Also want to mention that the money that I raised for these questions, I feel dirty for doing this. I'm gonna donate it to Ross Ulbricht's cause.
thank you.
It will probably not make much of a difference, but it's like $300. I don't know what it's going to accomplish, but it's something, and I wish more people would send him money because, once again, today is his 40th birthday, and he has been in prison for almost 11 years. And without him, I guess Bitcoin would never take off.
Yeah, I heard about Bitcoin thanks to his creation of the Silk Road, but I heard about it on a podcast or radio show called Free Talk Live. And we also I want to mention that the host of that radio show, where I heard about Bitcoin for the first time, uh, is also now currently in federal prison. I think they gave him an 8-year sentence. What did he do? He ran a Bitcoin ATM machine and didn't have the proper licensing for it. And he, stood to his principles, saying like, "Hey, I can do this." Like, and they offered him a plea deal, I think, with no prison time whatsoever. And he said, "No, I don't need your permission. I can run a Bitcoin ATM machine without the federal government's permission." And now he's in jail for 8 years. Ian Freeman is his name, a real hero for Bitcoin and a real hero for just, the ideas of voluntarism and libertarianism in general. Just a real great guy. And I'm really sad that he's in prison as well. And I can speak a little bit as someone who spent 10 months in federal prison myself. Ross Ulbricht's now more than 10 years. But it makes a huge, huge difference for people in there to know that there's still people on the outside that love and care and think about them, because you can really start to feel depressed and feel like the rest of the world is completely forgotten about you. So please consider taking the time to write Ross Ulbricht a letter, write Ian Freeman a letter, write anybody that's in prison for any sort of victimless crime, crypto related or not. If you know them or know of them, please spend a moment to send them a letter or a message, or you can do email nowadays. Back when I was in prison, you had to send physical letters, but I think now you can even do email. But they'll appreciate either one, and it'll make a real big difference in those people's lives. So please consider spending the time to do that.
I was going to also ask you, why do you think that the big block crowd, this community, is so divided? Because at first you had that split between BCH and BSV, and then you also have Dedel Nix, or how do you pronounce his name, who created
Yeah,
his own fork, which is called eCash right now.
So I think there was a big split between BCH and BSV with Craig Wright, because a lot of people were fooled by Craig Wright, and he fooled them and tricked them into thinking that he was Satoshi. So a lot of people wanted to honor who they thought was the creator of Bitcoin. In regards to Amaury Sachet and eCash, I don't think anybody pays any attention to that. I don't even know if it's in the top 100 of market cap of coins at this point. I think it's kind of a non-player at this point.
Oh, I have a funny story about his eCash because 2 years ago my cousin bought it and he sent me a message about it and was super excited and was telling me, if this one goes to $1, I'm gonna be super rich. And I told him, do you understand how this works? How much money it takes for that to go to $1? And why do you think that fork of a fork was going to go to $1? I don't know. It's strange.
A lot of people don't seem to understand, actually, and I think this is part of why Bitcoin still is the market leader. It's because of incumbency and just general ignorance of the public, not because of some inherent merit. But so many people look at the price per coin rather than the market cap of all the coins, right? And it's like the total market cap is what counts. It's not the price per coin. So like Ripple's price per coin is what, 60 cents, but the overall market cap is really big because there's so many coins. And it's amazing how few people understand the difference between overall market cap and then the price per coin. So many people just focus on the price per coin, and it's really I don't know, disappointing or frustrating.
Yeah, I agree with this. And I wanted to ask you something else because it's I'm trying to get you back, and I think it's been 7 years since your debate with John Carvalho, and he's still interested to talk with you, not necessarily to debate you, but both of you have gotten wiser over the last 7 years. And I'm offering to moderate a discussion if you ever want to have one, to see where you agree and where you disagree nowadays. Because a lot of the events in Bitcoin led to people agreeing with you in ways that they wouldn't have predicted. For example, ordinal inscriptions, when they emerged, people were complaining that SegWit has made transactions unfairly cheap. You were seeing
That
that
sounds
when
a bit familiar. So, and actually, I'd love to clarify on that point again too. So, like, a lot of the small blockers are saying, "Oh, now you're complaining that the transactions are unfairly cheap." No, because there's the overall total block space. The SegWit portion of the block space is at a discount compared to the other portion of the block space, and so like they're subsidizing the SegWit transactions, even though they take up a total a larger number of bytes, and that's why they had to have this whole block weight system. And so like I'm not complaining that Bitcoin transactions are unfairly cheap. I'm just complaining that the SegWit portion of transactions for the amount of resources they consume in the Bitcoin blockchain are unfairly cheap compared to traditional transactions. And so like interesting that the ordinals people are complaining about that, or the people opposed to it are
no,
complaining about
Warren
it.
Tagami from Blockstream, I read a tweet by him, and I consider him a friend. I'm not gonna slam him or something, but he did say that he wishes that these ordinal inscriptions would pay the full price for the block space and they would not benefit from the SegWit discount. And a lot of
The
people
irony.
agreed that they should remove the SegWit discounts. And it's crazy, because
Oh, I didn't realize that argument was happening in Bitcoin at the moment, but I feel so incredibly vindicated at this point, hearing that they're now saying exactly what I was complaining, and a number of other people were complaining about at the time. So thank you for letting me know about that. I don't know. I feel more than a little bit vindicated now that better late than never for people to realize that.
so John Carvalho said that he would be in favor of increasing the block size to 4 or 8 megabytes or some reasonable amount of space. And he said it's just politics. We have to agree that we need to onboard more people to Bitcoin and make it scale. And people told him, why do you want Bitcoin to scale? Do you want more spam from the NFT people, from the ordinal inscriptions? And it's insane that right now the argument against scaling is no longer propagation of orphaned blocks and storage and being harder for the average user to run a node. Now the argument against it is that it's going to enable more users to put arbitrary data inside of blocks. And I guess the fight right now in the next civil war is gonna be between people who are Puritan and say Bitcoin should only be used for financial transactions, and people who say it doesn't matter what you do as long as you pay the right fee for it.
Although there's
I
that
see it
fee
happening.
discount we talked about for SegWit. So yeah, pretty interesting how the arguments change from year to year. So in regards to John Carvalho, I don't have much desire to speak to him. I'm happy to debate people all day long. I've done tons of Bitcoin debates, and I enjoy them. The real big problem I have with John Carvalho is he invited me under false pretenses. He said he wanted to interview me about Bitcoin, and then so I thought we're going to have an interview, and then it turned out it was like a secret debate. And so like I'm fine to debate people, just don't do it under false pretenses, which is exactly what he did. And then he intentionally just pushed my buttons for 45 minutes before I finally lost my temper with him. And I feel like it would be like if Borat got me 7 years ago, having telling me he wanted to interview me and then pushes my buttons and I blew up. And then 7 years later, Borat's contacted me. Oh, sorry, Roger. Last time I pushed all your buttons for 45 minutes, but this time I really do want to have a conversation with you, or I really do want to have a debate with you. Like I I'd be happy to debate somebody else. I think John Carvalho, like, until an apology comes from him to me for inviting me under false pretenses to have an interview, I don't think I'm particularly interested in speaking with him any longer. But if that apology ever does come for the false pretense invitation, I think you would be a fantastic moderator. I've been enjoying my conversation with you a lot this evening, so thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for joining. And just for the record, since John has started a company where he builds on Lightning, I think he became super frustrated, and I think he understands you much better. And I think you also had some insights that other people did not have at the time, because too many people learn about Bitcoin from memes and from narratives and from marketing. And it's all nice and it's all super cool, and we're saving the world and we're bringing more financial freedom to the world until you look at the technical details and you see the limitations and you try to work around them. And that's a big headache.
Yeah, and it was such a big headache that literally, like, Bitcoin.com stopped focusing on Bitcoin. That's how big of a headache it was. Like the companies that were accepting Bitcoin stopped accepting it. And it doesn't get to be, there can't be much worse of a problem than the companies stop using the product. Like that's about as serious of a problem as you can possibly have. And the Blockstream guys intentionally created that problem on Bitcoin to where the users of Bitcoin stopped using it.
Well, also, if you look back in history, I think Adam Back also agreed to a block size increase. There's a Bitcoin magazine interview with him where he says what size of block is required to onboard most of the world's economy on it. Maybe I took it out of context or something, but he was in favor of increasing the block size. And I've interviewed, so I'm going to share with you some experiences that I had over the years doing this podcast. I've interviewed Thomas Voigtlin, the creator of Electrum, and he told me that he was never against the idea of increasing the block size, but he was against increasing the block size under the terms of the New York Agreement. And he said that users should not do it when a bunch of businesses push it, but should do it when there's genuine grassroots demand. And he's in favor of doing it in the future if there is some proper market demand as opposed to just a few businesses coming up with an agenda.
So I guess I'd love to point out that there was genuine grassroots demand, and there was like maybe 98% consensus among the different businesses as well in regards, and we cover all this in the book. So again, hijackingbitcoin.com, but Adam Back was 100% on board with raising the block size until he started a company called Blockstream that had a product called Liquid that depended on the block size not being raised for Bitcoin. And so the entire point of, or the entire way for Blockstream to make money was for people to not be able to use Bitcoin directly on chain because of the fees, and then use his his Liquid side chain there as well, which is a federated product, censorable. Basically, he had a financial incentive to cripple Bitcoin so that people would have to use Blockstream's product, and that's exactly what he did. And that was exactly when his tune changed in terms of raising the block size on Bitcoin, and it was really transparent, but the censorship really made a big difference. And so in regards to like the grassroots effort, the vast majority of the Bitcoin ecosystem and general users were in favor of increasing the block size. And then the censorship started. And after the censorship had been gone on for long enough, before you knew it, everybody that came to Bitcoin after the censorship started thought that I was the devil and that the small blocks were the way to go. And so like if I had to choose one thing that I really made a big mistake about was I really underestimated how effective censorship can be. And it's really, really, really effective. And just look at how many people around the world think that, Ross Ulbricht is a horrible person, or that Julian Assange is a horrible person, or that Edward Snowden is a horrible person. Like all of these people are heroes. But the propaganda and the censorship, in this case, mainly from governments, trick people into thinking the opposite of the truth. And the same was true with the censorship that went on around Bitcoin. They've tricked people into thinking the opposite of the truth. They think that small blocks keeps Bitcoin decentralized, whereas the actual truth of the matter, and now we have the empirical evidence, is that small blocks made Bitcoin more centralized and forced more people to use custodians than big blocks ever would have.
Well, I think you're still fighting this battle with Blockstream, but they faded from. I mean, they still have some influence, but at the same time, they failed to deliver any profitable product. They tried everything from mining to satellites to hardware wallets to t-shirts and hats and whatever. None of it was super profitable. Liquid never took off. It probably never will because people understand the trade-offs. They would rather transact on Ethereum for reasons which concern the lack of a federation.
Agreed on every point. Thank you.
So my point right now is that it's fine for you to come back to Bitcoin because the environment has changed. And I'm super excited with BitVM and with the people pushing for drive chains and for covenants. There's a very bright future of building stuff on top of Bitcoin. There's a burgeoning hacker spirit that's emerging once again. It seems like there's a changing of the guards when it comes to the generations of developers. People like Greg Maxwell and Peter Todd and Luke Dash Jr., they're not as active as they used to be. Even the maintainers have changed. There's a young lady named Gloria Zhao, who is one of the main maintainers right now, and she's more open. I spoke with her and she was talking about zero knowledge proofs and how you can sync a node in just sorry, I got too excited. How you can sync a node in just a few seconds with zero knowledge proofs by doing this roll up. I mean, you don't
That is
hear,
pretty exciting.
yeah, you don't hear the old guard talking about this, but I'm super excited when I hear that developers and the new generation of developers is looking into new developments in cryptography and they think of ways to bring it to Bitcoin. To me, that's what gives Bitcoin value. The fact that there is prospect for delivering on the initial promise. At least that's how I understand it. I don't care about institutions. I don't care about MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor, all of this stuff. It's just a phase, I think. It's gonna fade away. And sometimes I get excited at the thought that we're gonna basically dump on BlackRock at one point, and I don't know what's going to happen afterwards, but we're getting the most powerful financial institutions on board, and I think it would be poetic if we had a beautiful outcome out of it, and the average person won. It's a once in a generation opportunity, if you ask me, to
Maybe once
basically,
ever, right? Maybe
yeah,
once ever, not just generation, like once ever. Like when does the way the entire world's financial system is based change to something else? Like this is once ever. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's exciting for me too. So
yeah, exactly. That's why you should come back to Bitcoin. This is the whole agenda. I told you there's no agenda, but I'm gonna be trying to convince you that Bitcoin is not the same place it used to be 7 years ago, and Blockstream is not as powerful as it used to be. And there are a lot of young people who are building stuff. Maybe that, and I'm gonna get canceled. I'm gonna express two opinions right now that are gonna cancel me. The first one is that Ethereum contributed a whole lot to this whole hacker spirit. And a lot of people grew up in this environment and then they realized, oh, we can also do this on Bitcoin. And of course, it's the more secure chain. And we're going to work around the BIP procedure and create stuff like ordinal inscriptions. And then we're going to use ordinal inscriptions to put zero knowledge proofs inside of them for validating batches of transactions and doing rollups. That's a thing. And I did an interview about that. And then you have BitVM, which is trying to do the entire computation thing, but off chain. And right now it's pretty limited, but they found ways to work around the limitations. And it's super exciting because if they manage to pull it off, they're gonna make basically BIP 300 without the BIP, permissionless sidechains. I think that's a huge leap in terms of cryptography and development and scaling Bitcoin. That keeps me up at night when I think about it. I giggle. I think, okay, there are all of these limitations. It's hard to change Bitcoin. Maybe that, to some extent, it's nice that you can't have just a bunch of people changing it anymore with their political agenda. But we can have this and we can bring more financial freedom, as the way you always put it. And the second opinion that's gonna get me canceled, and I want to really say this, is that the BCH fork was a necessary evolutionary step for Bitcoin, especially after the disagreements from the Scaling Bitcoin conferences. Because it was necessary for the free market to express its opinion on this version, on this big block implementation. And I think BlackRock right now can do the exact same. Because at one point they said that an attack vector against Bitcoin is that you can fork it indefinitely and you can confuse the community as to which one is the real Bitcoin. And I think that BlackRock at one point might consider forking Bitcoin and creating their own version of it, which is entwined with their mainstream financial system, with the bankers and the Wall Street guys and all the suits. And they might try to do that, but there is a previous experience. There is this idea that you tried to promote Bitcoin Cash as the real Bitcoin, and the market disagreed with you. The users did not come. The miners, the majority of them, did not support BCH. And I guess also the developers, most of them still stuck with the original chain. And the fact that you did all of this was maybe detrimental for the community on the short term or the midterm, but on the long run, you made everything more resilient. So even if you're gonna disagree with me on some parts, I think you made Bitcoin stronger indirectly.
yeah, I think I agree with almost everything you said there, with a couple of caveats that, like, those scaling Bitcoin conferences that took place, they literally named the conferences Scaling Bitcoin, but a more accurate name would have been stalling Bitcoin. It was basically just a way to stall, and they already had their set agenda. And when I managed to attend two of them, the one of them was in Canada, and I couldn't get a visa for. It's a whole other story. They said that they were concerned about my future job prospects in my home country, and they were scared I was going to stay in Canada forever. But anyhow, the other conferences, it was just for show, I think, and just to stall people out. In regards to the other things that you were just talking about there, like they all sound like very exciting, right? Like fantastic, but I'm concerned, and I hope I'm wrong again, but like I'm concerned that this is also just like the perpetual 18 months away, like the Lightning Network was. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll get out there, and I hope they do. But in regards to like me attacking Bitcoin and saying Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin, like a lot of people I think don't realize how incredibly close the BTC ticker symbol and the Bitcoin name almost like so incredibly close wound up being what's called Bitcoin Cash today. And the 1 megabyte thing that's called Bitcoin today would have had some other name. Like it was so razor close. And I think the argument's still very clear. If you read the Bitcoin white paper today, like it's not describing BTC. And you can make a very strong argument that it's describing, BCH or even some other chains at this point, but it's certainly not describing BTC. But did it make Bitcoin, the thing that's called Bitcoin today, stronger? Yeah, probably. Like, so I guess you're welcome for that. Although it wasn't my intent at the time. My intent at the time was, I'm 45 years old today. I wanted to have this peer-to-peer permissionless cash for the entire world widely available by today. And I think that, we're maybe, 10 years behind schedule from where we could have been if we hadn't run into that scaling civil war within Bitcoin. But if I can ask you, make your best pitch to me for the most exciting thing on Bitcoin that might actually enable it to be this disruptive peer-to-peer electronic cash that's not censorable and not controllable and beyond the reach and control of the governments and the BlackRocks of the world. Like which aspect of BTC should attract me so much on that front that would make me want to go back and spend my time and energy and effort and money on promoting BTC rather than some other alternative?
The long pitch would be listen to season 15 of the Bitcoin Takeover podcast because I have interviews with some of the brightest minds who are trying to improve on Bitcoin. They're not saying, oh, this is perfect money. Let's all LARP all day and jerk each other off on Twitter saying that we're all gonna get rich and blah, blah, blah. They're actual builders. And you have guys who came from Ethereum who came up with ways to circumvent the limitations of Bitcoin and push it to create two-way pegged sidechains that are trust minimized and all of these ideas that will get huge in the future, roll-ups and sidechains. That gets me super excited. So if you want, I can make you a playlist of that. The short version of it is just look into BitVM because I think that one is a major breakthrough in terms of how Bitcoin is gonna be used in the future.
But
It's
there's
just
nothing
huge.
available today or imminently with a set date or anything like that, right? These are all
No,
indefinite
it's there. It's
improvements in the
working.
future.
It's operational.
BitVM.
It's just very limited right now because you have to insert what's it called, assembly code into it. So it's very basic. It's bare bones at this point.
Okay.
With Covenants, if we ever get a soft fork for Covenants, it's gonna have all of its functionality extended. So it can become much more powerful with that. But the
Okay.
creator, his name is Robin Linus, and I've had him, I think it was episode 15 of this season. And he was involved in Ethereum working for some ICO, and he got super disillusioned with the entire process, and he went through an existential crisis, and then he came up with something super legit on Bitcoin. I mean, think about the EVM on Ethereum. A lot of people complain about it. They say it's slow and efficient, and I guess a lot of other designs have come along the way to improve on it, but Ethereum is still the one with the network effect and the one
Yep.
that has more economic applications built on top of it. But Bitcoin can absorb all of that with something that's built off chain and can work with trust minimized sidechains. I mean, the layer twos, and this is another point that I think is useful to point out, that Ethereum was completely adversarial to everything happening in Bitcoin and is trying to flip it, right? But at one point, when they had academics and they had grown-ups stepping into the room, because for a while it was all about Casper and whatever, that didn't work out, they started building layer twos on top of it. And with the latest upgrade, they're still focusing on optimizing layer 2s. But the layer 2s that they did are not trust minimized. There are some keys that are held by the creators of the layer 2s, and they can make some arbitrary changes. So it's not immutable. You have to trust the issuer of the layer 2. On Bitcoin, if we manage to do proper sidechains, there will be no such possibility. You'll have maybe the miners enforcing and securing these sidechains, but they will be immutable to a degree. So I'm excited about this.
Okay. Well, I was really excited for this podcast and interview today and appreciate it. But I think we're an hour and 20 minutes in, and it's about my bedtime. It's almost 11 p.m. in my part of the world. So, but I really appreciate the opportunity today. And for anybody that's interested in the civil war that went on within Bitcoin, please head on over to hijackingbitcoin.com or just search on Amazon for Hijacking Bitcoin. And I think you'll really find it an entertaining and interesting and very detailed book about everything that went on with the civil war within Bitcoin.
Roger, I just have one last question.
Let's do it.
Have you heard about the Supra cycle?
Supra cycle, no.
Supra cycle, yeah. I know you're
I'm
a
looking at
Lambo guy.
the graphics you put up on the page here. So one Supra
You
equals one
bought
girl.
2 Lambos that I know of. You bought one in the previous bear market. It doesn't matter what it was, but the point is that most guys will never afford a Lambo, and even if they do, it's a bad idea to buy a Lambo because, the maintenance costs are high. So what is 90% of the Lambo experience at 10% of the Lambo price? And that's the Toyota Supra. And I made up this. So there was Dan Held, I'm not sure if you're aware of his work, but he came up with the super cycle, which was this idea that Bitcoin price is gonna go up forever. And I said, no, 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 that's stupid. Let's make the super cycle, which is just a stupid line that I drew on the chart. And so far, it's the most successful and accurate prediction model. All of them broke, stock to flow broke, this one hasn't, because it's just one line drawn on some chart. And the premise of it is that you get a super and you get a girlfriend. So it's also aspirational. It's not just hold forever and never spend like Michael Saylor tells you. It's about making your life a bit better. And I'm not getting paid by Toyota. It's just that there is no alternative to the Supra right now. Maybe the Civic, but who wants to get a Honda Civic? Seriously.
And the previous generation Supras with their 2JZ engines, those were absolutely incredible, incredible engines. I had some friends that had some and used to do a bit of a drag racing when I was younger. So really a big fan of that. But I will tell one Lambo story, if you don't mind. A lot of people think that I bought a Lambo, or maybe some people think I bought a Lambo with like Bitcoin money early on. I actually bought my first Lambo in maybe 2007. So before Bitcoin had ever even been invented. And then I sold that Bitcoin. I was actually supposed to sell it to Mark Karpelis. He said if Bitcoin ever hits $10, he would buy it from me. But then he got busy when it actually did hit $10 for the first time and didn't buy it to me. But I wound up selling my Lamborghini not too long after that in order to buy additional Bitcoin. So I'm probably one of the only people that sold their Lambo to buy more Bitcoin. And I did that when I think 2012 probably. So.
Do you still have Bitcoin? Because a lot of people ask this, that are you
Yeah.
still financially involved in Bitcoin?
Of course. I still have Bitcoin, and like a lot of people don't know, like, I'm a co-founder of Ripple. So I've had XRP, I've had Dash, I still have, I don't know, I can't even count how many coins. I probably have maybe 100 different coins and tokens across the spectrum there. So I've never ever been a BTC or BCH maximalist or anything else for that matter. So yes, of course I still have BTC.
Yeah, this was useful to know. And just so you know, you're always welcome in Bitcoin. Some people
Thank you so
think
much
you,
for
you
that.
never left, but at the same time, you're so good at convincing people to get on board with this. And as we agreed today or tonight, because it's evening where you live, this is a once, not just in a generation, maybe once in history
Once ever.
opportunity to get people on board to something that can improve their lives tremendously. So thank you very much, Roger. In the next section, you can go. I'm just gonna show my ref links right now. I
Okay.
have this.
Thank you so much, Vlad. I appreciate the platform and the opportunity. So
Thanks, Roger.
good night, everyone.
So guys, if you want to help me get a Supra, check out the Sato chip. You can buy one for about 25 euro. And go to satochip.io and get this card that helps you store your Bitcoin on a smart card. If you want to learn more about Sato chip, then there's an interview that I recorded with the two guys, Bastien and Baudouin, and they were here on the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. And there's also the Sato dime that helps you turn your Bitcoin into a better asset. And if you buy this one and use promo code BTCTKVR, I think I need to sell like 20,000 of these to get enough money to buy a Supra, but it's worth a challenge, you know? I think it's a cool product. Check it out. And if you also need a metal backup, there's the crypto steel capsule, and it's pretty affordable. It's really cool. You can use it to store all of your private keys or important passwords. It's not just optimized for BIP39. And you can also buy this one with a 10% discount using promo code BTCTKVR. And I think I need to sell like 8,000 of these to get a Supra, so it's worth the hustle, I think. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking and subscribing. I hope you liked the questions that I asked to Roger. I tried to have the most civil of interviews that he ever recorded in the last 7 years, maybe. And I hope I'm not canceled after this one, so thank you very much. And I'll see you in the next one. I'm gonna have more interviews from this season, as it turns out.